Good afternoon, and welcome to Be Bold, Leadership Lessons I Have Learned, a complimentary webinar from HealthSystemCIO.com, sponsored by Perceptive Software. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the editor-in-chief of HealthSystemCIO.com, and I will be your moderator today. We encourage you to send in questions, which you can do at any time by typing them into the Q&A box, the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and leave the default set to all panelists. We'll be taking those later in the session. You can download the deck using the URL on your screen, or you can use the shortened URL that appears on the bottom of all slides, and I'll also send it out in the chat box during the event. And we will have an archive of our event today. Should be ready within 2 business days, and we'll send you an email when it's ready, and a separate registration is required. Just to give you an idea how we're going to spend our time today, we're going to go about 45 minutes. First, we're going to hear from Daniel Barchi, SVP and CIO at Yale New Haven Health System. Then we're going to hear from our sponsor, represented by Darren Knipp, COO at Perceptive Software. And then we'll have our Q&A with Daniel. So without further delay, I'm going to turn the baton over to Daniel Barchi. Daniel, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Anthony, and thanks for having me this afternoon. Happy to share lessons that I've learned. These are by no means the right answers, but simply some of the experiences that I've had over the past few years in a couple of different industries. I'd like to start with a quote from Annie Nin. I really do believe that life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage, and the more bold that we are, the bigger chances we take, the bigger opportunities that we have in life. And that's certainly been my experience, and, like many of us, some of the most challenging jobs that I've had have been some of the ones that gave the most experience and had the greatest outcome. I think it's important for us to be innovative leaders, especially in healthcare, and that means, first of all, being bold, thinking differently, taking risks, investing in the people we work with, not being afraid to fail, and then sticking through it when things don't go well. Just a little background about what I'm doing right now. I'm the Chief Information Officer of the Yale New Haven Health System, which is 3 hospitals, about 2,500 beds, about $3.5 billion. And this is where it gets really interesting. I'm also the Chief Information Officer of the Yale School of Medicine, which is an independent organization that's part of the Yale University and entirely different from the health system. So I sit in between both of those institutions, in addition to the day in and day out jobs of IT and other technology leadership. I make sure that both of these organizations are working well and working for one goal, really. That's the outcome for our patients. Before I got into healthcare, I had a number of different careers. I was a naval officer and drove cruisers around the world, and I had great experiences there. I got a lot of leadership lessons day in and day out operating around the world. I got out of the Navy after 7 years and was a telecommunications project manager, building networks around the world for big customers like the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the World Bank. Taught me a lot about global business and how to operate, especially when things get challenging. And then I got into healthcare, and I've got to tell you, having driven ships around the world and built networks around the world, healthcare is by far the most challenging industry that I've ever been in. Not only do we have all of the business challenges and the technology and operations challenges, people's lives are on the line, and it's important that we do our work well, and it's really rewarding, which I'm sure most of you feel as well. It's also worth doing because we haven't always done it well. Many of us are familiar with the Institute of Medicine report that came out in '99 about preventable medical errors, and this is amazing to me, but we as a healthcare industry in North America cause about 44,000 unneeded deaths annually. This is not a 98-year-old patient who is in their end state comes in and happens to die in our hospital. This is the relatively healthy 36-year-old who comes in for a routine procedure, and we do the wrong thing and they expire as a result. 44,000 times a year in 1999, more than motor vehicle accidents or breast cancer or a lot of other conditions. What's challenging is that despite all of our work, this hasn't changed a whole lot since then, and it's for a lot of the reasons you might expect. This is one example. Mr. Ramon Vasquez went into his local physician because he wasn't feeling well, had some trouble with his chest. He wasn't sure what it was. His physician examined him, thought his heart was okay, but gave him a prescription for angina. He went and had it filled by a local pharmacy, and 3 or 4 days later he was dead. And you think, oh my gosh, how can this happen to an otherwise pretty healthy person? When you look at the prescription that was made for Mr. Ramon Vasquez, the physician wanted to write a prescription for Iserdil for angina attacks. The pharmacist filled it for Plendil, a calcium channel blocker, which essentially got in the way of his heart functioning appropriately. And there's a blow-up of what the physician wrote on the script pad. And I challenge anybody to figure if that's Iserdil or Plendil. At the end of the day, the patient died in an otherwise really healthy modern American health system. And it's mistakes like this which we are now correcting through implementation of core technology and electronic medical records that really make what we do day in and day out worthwhile. Now, the challenge is it's not just technology that improves things. I like to say inside my health system that you can take an otherwise bad system and add technology and it has no difference. For instance, the outcome of this patient would be no different if we put the best workstation on wheels in front of the surgeon. That surgeon's not going to know how to use the tool. Patient's outcome is going to be the same. But we keep coming back to technology as being a differentiator when in many cases it's not. Many of us know Marc Probst, great CIO at Intermountain Health out in Utah. He likes to talk about BSOs, which sounds technical, but BSO stands for bright, shiny objects. We like to think that these bright, shiny objects, if we pay enough millions for them, are going to solve all of our problems. But Marc has said publicly that informatics is about 80% people, about 15% process, and about 5% technology. And I think that's absolutely true for informatics. But quite frankly, it's true for just about anything that we do. It's really about the people in the process, not so much about the technology we do. So we often like to use dollars as the reason why we can't do anything. Gosh, doctor, I'd really like to help you with that, but, we don't have the money to do it this year. Or, I'd really like to help our operations team with a new way that we room patients or park our cars or deliver food and nutrition, but we don't have the dollars to do it. But if you really think about it, the dollars represent what you have to pay for the technology piece and are small in the big scheme of things. Time is a resource that we use and can allocate ourselves however we choose, and then the people are largely the people who are already in the organization and existing. So not having the dollars, I found, is not a good reason to do anything, and my role as an IT leader has been enhanced by the fact that I try to leave the technology and the dollars behind and say, hey, let's talk about the process. I've got a great team of leaders working with me. We'd be happy to sit down and talk through the process and figure out what the next steps are. And if technology plays a role, great. If it doesn't, we'll help you anyway. One of the other lessons that I learned about operating in healthcare, and quite frankly anywhere, I learned driving a ship. Driving one of these ships is interesting and it's really complex. And one of the jobs that I had was literally standing on the bridge anywhere from 8 to 12 hours a day with binoculars in hand, scanning the horizon, looking at the radar, seeing what other ships are out there. Because, as advanced as our Navy and our military are these days, one of the challenges of driving one of these 600-foot long ships is that, when you're thinking about it, what does it have on board? It's about 600 feet long, has about 2 guns, 128 missiles, about 400 crew members, 2 helicopters, 4 engines, 2 propellers. You know what it doesn't have? It doesn't have brakes. So when you're driving one of these things, you really don't want to hit anything because there's no way to stop yourself. So literally, when you're driving it, you're looking all around 360 degrees to see what other ships are out there, what might be in your way, and making decisions literally about where you're going to go next. Imagine trying to drive home at the end of the day without brakes on your car and you start to think about the focus that you have. So you would think that if in this condition, the best thing to do is to drive slowly, literally just to creep along because you're not likely to hit anything. The challenge I found, though, is when you're driving one of these 600-foot long ships, it's like 2 football fields. When you're creeping along at 5 knots, which is about 6 or 7 miles an hour, anything can hit you. So the cruise ship on your port bow can hit you, the ship on your starboard beam can hit you, the speedboat can come up behind and hit you. Really, you're at the mercy of everything, and when you've got binoculars in your hand, you're walking around the top of the ship looking 360 degrees, worried about everything at every point of attack. Now, when you say, no, we need to go fast, we've got to get to the Red Sea really quickly, all engines ahead, flank 3, let's make about 36, 37 knots. really the only things can hit you are somewhere in a small cone about 3 or 4 degrees off your port bow or 3 or 4 degrees off your starboard bow. Everything else is just flying down the side of you. And that's a message that I've shared with my teams no matter where I've worked since I've left the Navy. Really, let's not focus on the small stuff. Let's not worry about the color of the binders. Let's not worry if the protocol is written this way or that way. Let's get to the more important things. What's in it? How does it affect our patients? Let's make a decision quickly and move on, because then we'll have the greatest effect. So that's what I've told my team. Be bold, move quickly, and largely it's worked out very well. That translates to having an aggressive healthcare schedule in healthcare as well. When we make decisions relatively quickly, it really forces people at the table to participate. It reduces debate, you get results more quickly, everybody's at the table, and you get most of the difficult decisions and difficult work done early in the process. I've seen it happen several times. One of the key ways that it happens is when you're implementing a large integrated EMR. I've talked to health systems that have done it a number of different ways. We tend to do rip the Band-Aid off quickly. I've done enterprise-wide EMR installations in about 13 hospitals, and every time we've had the opportunity to go slowly, like one nursing unit at a time, or maybe we'd start just with the pharmacy, then move to inpatient and then imaging. But in every case, we've said, you know what? We want to get the results. It's worth doing well. It's worth investing the time. Let's do everything in a big bang, including all of our CPOE and our billing at the same time. And as a result, by being bold, by moving quickly, the risk is certainly much, much higher. But if you can get the results and you can mitigate the risk, the reward for moving quickly is very, very good. Samuel Johnson, a noted 18th century thinker, says, nothing focuses a man's mind in the way that it does if he's known that he's going to hang at dawn. And I really feel that's the case. If you really know something big is going to come up, you're really going to focus on it. And that's the way we've approached most of our EMR implementations. Now, being bold and going fast requires a good deal of courage as well. I've got a picture here of St. Joan of Arc, and I put it up here because one of the chief medical officers that I worked with at one of my hospital go-lives, Dr. Joan Fisher, was a pediatric oncologist. And you think, gosh, oncology in peds, that's courageous to begin with. This person not only was a courageous clinician, she was a great leader of her peers. And when we were getting ready to go live with an EMR, she sent this message to everybody, which essentially said, hey, look, if you don't get your EMR training done and get your password by this certain date, you're not going to be able to take care of our patients. And if that's the case, I'll take that as your decision to voluntarily resign from our organized medical staff. Wow, that was not me. That was a clinician who showed a lot of courage, was really bold in the way she went about it. And you know what? She got thousands of physicians to line up with her. Not all of them were happy about it, but she clearly set the tone, and the expectations were followed. I found that really courageous. I'll tell you another story in one of the industries that I helped run for a while. I'm not sure this is courage, and I'll leave it up to you to decide. I was sent to be the chief operating officer of one of the subsidiary companies of the organization I worked for. And it wasn't going well. Things weren't going well. It was close to being out of money. We had a major deliverable, and I was really counting on a couple of key people. One day, the head of security for the organization came to me and said, I think somebody's stealing material from our warehouse. And I said, wow, tell me about it. And they told me about it, and not only did they tell me what was happening, they told me the name of the person, and I was floored. This is one of my key reports who knew everything about what we were doing. This person knew more about the industry and what we were accomplishing than I did, and without them, we would have certainly failed. And I was kind of at a decision point. What do? I didn't believe it at first, but the security officer showed me the videotape, and I thought, there it is. And so I called this person in, and each one of you is thinking, gosh, what would I have done in this situation? I think the right business school decision is, oh yeah, you get rid of a person like that. I talked to them. I challenged them on it. They denied it. I said, go watch this videotape. They left the room, watched the videotape, came back in, handed me the videotape, left the room again, and about half an hour later came back in and said, nothing's missing anymore. And I said, thank you very much, and we went about our business. I didn't trust the person, but we got the job done. We got out of the really bad situation the company was in, and after a while, he left. And should I be proud of that decision? Was it courageous? I don't know. I called him on it, but I didn't report him on it. He turned the stuff back in. Had I fired him, I think we would have been in a horrible situation, and quite frankly, I wouldn't have got my job done. Was this a bold decision? I'm not sure it was bold. I made the decision relatively quickly, based mostly on my gut. I think it was the right decision. It's certainly the best outcome, but I don't think it would have been classified as the best decision by a lot of outsiders. But I'll stick with it, and it's good to think about. I've made a lot of good decisions. I've made a lot of bad decisions. One of the things I was asked about to talk about today were what were some of the best and some of the worst. And I will tell you, some make you look really foolish and some make you look like a superhero. I couldn't say that there were any specific worst ones or best ones. I would tell you generally, though, the best decisions, the one that are in the upper quadrant of the yellow middle area, the best decisions were all about people. It wasn't about a buy decision or a make decision or a process decision. It was about, hey, where do we put her? She's got a lot of skills. What are her next steps? Or how do we invest in him? Or what are unique ways that she can contribute to this? And the more time that I've spent on people, the better outcomes that I've had. And quite frankly, it's more rewarding, and it translates to everything else as well. When you get all the right people in the right positions, they feel supported. So I'd say among some of the better decisions that I've had, they've been about people. Now, worst decisions, had a number of them as well. But what I like to think about when I've made bad decisions is I haven't been so stubborn that I needed to stick with them. Essentially, what I tell my team is when you make a bad decision, don't ride it all the way down. Just admit defeat. So getting back to this area, instead of being in the far left red, it's okay to be in the lower quadrant here and recognize that we've made a bad decision as long as we can recover from it. So nothing really, really bad, some not so great that we're recoverable from. I think it's worth taking risks. Some of those are bold decisions that you make, and some of it is when you just make a decision when you don't have all the information. And that's one of my favorite quotes. Colin Powell is known to have said, hey, once you have the information in the 40 to 70% range, go with your gut. He essentially said, don't wait until you've got 95, 98, 99% of the information. At that point, anybody could have made the call, and quite frankly, the opportunity has probably passed. So I encourage my team to take risks and be okay with the idea that they're going to make a decision without all the information. Now, that's true in business decisions we make when it's about the patient's drug order or how you titrate a liquid into them. Clearly, you have to be very specific about patient care. But when it comes to implementation of technology or business decisions, it's okay to go with your gut once you've got most of the information. One of the other things that we're not quite always prepared for is the idea of failure. Now, one of my bosses once said, be fluid because flexible is even too rigid. Failing and adapting is okay. One of my personal heroes is Abraham Lincoln, well known for his leadership. And I saw this billboard one day, and I thought, gosh, I can't think of Abraham Lincoln as a failure. But then I dug into his past, and it's amazing. He started by losing a job in 1832. He ended by being elected president in 1860. But when you look at everything that happened between those 2 points, lost a job, failed in business, defeated, he had a sweetheart die, he had a nervous breakdown, he lost nominations, he was rejected for land officer, defeated for the U.S. Senate. When you think that this guy was rejected to be a land officer in 1849, then 11 years later was elected president, I find that very, very impressive. He's somebody who just persevered even when it meant that he had to overcome adversity. You might not recognize this person. It's interesting. He has the same glasses on in every case. It's President Harry Truman. The story goes that when he was an officer in World War I and was shipped off to Europe, he brought 11 pairs of glasses with him because he wanted to be prepared in case anything happened to him. The thing I like about this guy is he was an utter failure himself. He wasn't that good a student. He wasn't that great a military officer. When he got out of the military, he opened a clothing store, which promptly failed, and he opened another store, which promptly failed. And he got into politics probably because he wasn't good at a whole lot of other things. But he stuck with it. He persevered. He overcame. Through a number of interesting circumstances, he became FDR's vice president, and then when Franklin Delano Roosevelt died, he was sworn in as the president himself. He ended World War II and became a president in his own right. Here's clearly a person who was okay with failure and adapted and changed and was a success as a result. Winston Churchill says, never quit, never, never, never quit. My father-in-law says, when you're going through hell, keep going. So the idea of perseverance is important to me, and I share with my team as well. The example I like to talk about is the Wright brothers. If you've seen license plates, you know that North Carolina claims it's first in flight. There's a little star down in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. But you think, why exactly were the Wright brothers in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, when they lived in Dayton, Ohio? And when you think about what they accomplished, it's not just they built a plane one day and went out and flew it. No, they spent a lot of time planning, and year after year rode the train back and forth between Dayton and Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, not because it was flat, but because they'd studied national atmospheric tables that showed where the winds were best in the United States. So they persevered, and they didn't just start one year and build the plane. They started with a rubber band airplane, then they built a glider kite, then a larger glider kite, then a manned glider, before finally ending up with powered flight many, many years later. And I think that's one of my best stories, my favorite stories about persevering and sticking to what you're doing. So what I tell my team is we've got to think differently. It's worth being bold and taking risks, investing in our people, being okay with adapting after failure, and then persevering. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. Anthony?
Well, all I could say is wow. As a history lover and a history buff, that was incredible, and I'm looking forward to some nice discussion. Before we get to that, I want to turn it over to. I'm sorry. I'm just having a little screen issue here. I want to turn it over to Darren Nipp, Chief Operating Officer with our sponsor, Perceptive Software. Darren?
Anthony, thanks for having me. It's an honor to sponsor Daniel's presentation. The Yale organization has been a partner of Perceptive's for over 7 years, and they're an organization we're proud to be associated with due to their commitment to the delivery of world-class research and care. For us at Perceptive Software, leadership means listening intently to our customers and partners, and then being relentless about delivering what they need to be successful. Achieving this means being bold, making promises, and keeping them, as you heard from Daniel. Bold leadership inspires our team to be leaders with our customers and in our community. Here we are at one of our many community service initiatives in Kansas City, home of Harry Truman. I think it's important to inspire the people that are our customers, connect with every day, and channel their enthusiasm into a drive to make our customers as successful as they can be. As Daniel mentioned, it comes down to 80% people, 15% process, and 5% technology. In healthcare, as Daniel mentioned, keeping promises is more vital than in any other sector. As a software vendor, we serve our immediate customers, but ultimately are helping them serve their customers, the patients. And often that concept of customer must include the patient's family as well. They have a fundamental expectation that their health system will always perform at its best, with the best physicians, the best medical technologies, the best research, and the best collaborative care models. The patient doesn't want to have to understand how the health system operates or how vendor technologies are chosen. They just want it to operate at its best when they need it. The consumer standard for healthcare is high and always will be. For Perceptive, leadership is about anticipating our customers' needs and taking them where they need to go. The end state is for all stakeholders to have access to the right information at the right time so they can make the best decision, as Daniel mentioned earlier, in the context of the electronic medical record where we help them deliver on that promise. As a vendor to many healthcare organizations, we've seen the art and science of leadership and decision-making firsthand. We've been on both sides of the decision process, and we'd like to think that it was always an easy decision for our customers, but we know it's much more complex than that. Our customers trust us to deliver on our promise, which is to enable a patient-centered care that includes images and documents and integrates easily with the EMR. Thank you to Health System CIO for having me today, and thank you to Daniel Barchi for your thought-provoking presentation, and I'll hand it back over to Anthony.
All right, great, Darren. Thank you, and thank you to Perceptive for sponsoring the event today. Well, we have plenty of time for questions, and so please send them in, like I mentioned before, type them in to the Q&A box to leave the default set to all panelists, and then we will review those and post them to Daniel. Daniel, let me start. This is going to be so much fun because, like I said, this whole topic is right up my alley, and especially the historical references. But
I'm glad to hear that. I was impressed that Darren got the Harry Truman being from Kansas City piece as well. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's good to know that there are a few things that come from the flyover state, so yes.
Okay. Well, first thing I want to talk to you about, Daniel, is when you see, I know you need specifics on each case, but when you see an implementation totally crash, when you read in the news that we've seen these from time to time. We saw one recently. And you mentioned being aggressive and going big bang and, quick timelines. But sometimes when we see something like that, we say, I wonder if it was too fast. I wonder if they didn't lay the groundwork and do the homework and prepare people. Any thoughts do you have on why or typical reasons an implementation might just not fly?
Sure, Anthony. As you asked that question, I whipped open my wallet and took out a business card from about 10 or 11 years ago on which I wrote 7 principles that I've tried to follow. And I'm going to read them quickly and then point out 1 or 2 that apply to really failed EMRs. And the 7 are: be open and honest. 2 is no secrets or skeletons. 3 is self-direct, use your own judgment. 4 is communicate expectations. 5 is 70% of the information is enough. 6 is be quick and nimble. And 7 is always treat each other with respect. The 2 that I'd point out from that list are communicate expectations and no secrets or skeletons. My sense is that when an EMR blows up on the pad, and we all hear about it and read about it and bemoan the fact that it didn't go well, my sense is that a lot of people knew it wasn't going to go well. It was one of those people know it's not going to go well, don't have a good feel, but nobody wants to say anything. It's the no secrets and no skeletons. We need to get these kind of things out in the open. If it's not going to go well, if we know we haven't done the testing, if people know that we haven't built all of the order sets or haven't cross-checked on all the drugs or we haven't done the end-to-end testing on all of the billing, you can't push the start button and hope things are going to go well. And so I think we have to be honest with one another about our expectations about what's going to happen. So that'd be, in short, my answer. It's not about doing some retrospective looking after the failure. It's, are we being honest with ourselves leading up to the day that a go-live happens?
I've heard CIOs talk about getting beaten up, right? One joked with me about, he eats lunch in a very accessible place in the hospital where, people just come up to him and beat him up all the time. Well, there can be a real benefit to that because, as you mentioned, the communication's key. So if you're getting beaten up, at least people are getting their frustrations out. I guess on the other end of the spectrum, you can have a CIO that kind of doesn't do the front rounds and walk the floor and kind of is, holed up in the office. And then you don't have that valve of expression. Does that make sense? And maybe talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Sure, it makes a lot of sense. There's a little bit of a gallows humor in healthcare IT. The joke is, how long does it take to implement an EMR? And the answer is about 2.5 CIOs. So things don't always go well, and the chief information officer in the leadership of technology is often at the receiving end of a lot of pointed feedback. I do think it's valuable to be a relief valve. I give out my mobile number wherever I can. In fact, I don't even give out my office number because it gets screened. I'm not there. It goes to voicemail. But I've always got my mobile phone with me, and I would rather hear from the angry physician or the nursing director at 7:30 on a Thursday night about the problem than have them stew about it or write the angry email at midnight and not find out about it until 6 o'clock the next morning. So I think there's a lot of value in being visible. And in many ways, as healthcare leaders, it's not my job to know our STIP protocol or our IP routing tables. In fact, if we're counting on that, we really are in trouble. But it's my job to know what our capabilities are, where our priorities are, and make sure that they're aligning with those of the health system. And if I hear from our end users, from our clinicians, from our financial team, that we're not meeting those needs, it's my job to communicate them back to my team. So I see myself as a significant go-between, and I get a lot of value from simply walking around. And I think that your point is well made, Anthony.
So having an open door policy and giving everyone your mobile number is good on paper, right? I mean, that sounds good, that's good, and you are accessible. But sometimes you need to get things done. And this, maybe I'm being silly and going into this detail, but sometimes you don't want to be interrupted. You're in the middle of doing something important, doing a budget or something where you don't want your train of thought, or writing something or doing a webinar. So there is a balance between being accessible and otherwise, if you take that too far, you can't get anything done.
True. You make a really good point. Although, we've all experienced it early in our careers. We were all about sitting in a desk, in a cube, getting, quote, work done. As our careers progress, we have more responsibility. It's more about making the connections and walking around. And other than, say, preparing for today or writing an article, I'm not getting a whole lot of work done myself. And quite frankly, the more that I'm doing, writing a policy or reviewing things, I should really be challenging others to use their intelligence, because it's the experts who work for me. I am not an expert in anything that we're doing. In fact, having reviewed my career, I've never really been qualified for any of the jobs that I've had, and by going from industry to industry, I've been both hampered and blessed by the idea that I'm not tied down with years of history about what happened to whom over time. I have the facts that are in front of me at any time and need to focus on that and move forward. I'll tell you this funny story, though. I have a daughter who just finished up her freshman year in college, and she's doing an internship and hanging out with some very senior leaders, and she comes home at the end of the day and says, "Dad, these people do nothing. All they're doing is just chatting with one another." And I said, "Oh, that's funny," but I didn't know how that applied. But then I had her in to work with me one day, and I was walking around introducing her to other executives in our health system, and she's standing there while we're catching up on our weekends, or talking about our plans, or talking about issues, and she said, "See, there you go." And it's true. I think as leaders, we tend to use communications as the way to get things done. It's not about sitting down with an hour blocked off to write the next paper or email.
Very good. Next question. What is the best way to implement a solution amidst a group of negative members, a solution or process against a group of negative members, and the fact that you are not in the position of authority to roll out or implement these changes of solution or process? So I think the question is basically, and John Halamka has talked about this a lot, having accountability, but not all the I forget how he put it, but basically he's responsible for it, but doesn't have sometimes the authority levers to tell people what to do. So what are your thoughts around that, dealing with negative folks when maybe they're not direct line reporting to you?
That is a great question, and that's one of the greatest challenges in healthcare IT, because there are so many expectations of us, but we know that we don't have all of the tools, or we don't have unlimited labor to get things done, and we have to make choices. And actually, I think we get ourselves in trouble when we find ourselves making the choices, one over the other, and not communicating what's going on. I've found that as the CIO of health systems that have multiple hospitals, I can either get in the way of the process or facilitate things happen. And early on, I was getting in the way. I would really listen to one of the, say, chief nursing officers at one hospital, and then go meet with another one and try to sell the second one on the first one's idea, and then go to the third one and try to synthesize it. Now I'm much better at being the person who really probably shouldn't be making the decision, but teeing them up for others. So that's a skill that my team and I really work on, not necessarily being the decision makers, but being the conveners, gathering the information, and then putting in front of the decision makers and saying, hey, here are the choices. Go ahead and make any of the decisions. We're kind of neutral on them. We'd recommend choice B or C, but quite frankly, if one works for you all, go ahead and tell us. The catch to all that is they all have to agree on it. So person one can't tell us one thing, and person two tells us the second, and person three tells us the third thing. As long as they all agree, that we're fine implementing that. And that's what we've focused all of our efforts on, convening people to get them at the table and teaching them that they can't just tell us their opinion and then throw it back at us. We're getting better at managing people and decisions than we are about technology.
Talk a little bit about the role of governance in leadership. Can you lead well on top of, I would imagine there's such a thing as a poor governance structure. There must be. So can you lead effectively on top of a poor governance structure, and maybe, the other way around? If you have really good governance, is it possible to screw it up? So I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
I think the answer is yes to all of those. It's interesting. In healthcare IT, we have governance in a way that a lot of other areas don't. And a CIO recently said to me, the funny thing is, I've got an IT governance organization in my health system. There's no HR governance structure. Why is everybody looking over our shoulders? And I think, quite frankly, is because we spend a lot of money. We have a lot of lives at stake, and we're expected to deliver major things. But it's still challenging at times. I've seen IT governance work really well and work not so well. When it's working really well, it's got engaged leaders from across many disciplines who really care about helping make good decisions and then give a bit of air cover to the organization, particularly the IT organization, as they carry it out. When it's bad governance, it's not necessarily that it's doing something wrong, but if it's governance for governance sake and the IT leadership is putting together the agenda and briefing and essentially bringing pre-made decisions to the table just so they're officially made, not so good. So I've never seen bad governance. I've just seen governance that hasn't been really worthwhile, and then I've seen governance where engaged people really are helping.
Very good. Next question. End-user engagement is a key to success when implementing an EHR. What role does leadership play in engaging clinical staff and gaining buy-in?
Great question. So when I was about to implement the first EMR I ever did, and this was in 2006 or so, we visited a health system where they said, it was great. Our CEO stood up in 2003 and said, the EMR is the biggest thing we're doing this year. We all have to get behind it. And then in 2004, the CEO stood up again and said, hey, we're 2 years through the 3-year plan. This is the biggest thing we're doing, and then did it again the third year. This is our number one focus. And at first I thought, well, that was great. The CEO was out there shouting from the rooftops how important it was. And then as we implemented at the health system I was at the time, our EMR, I found that executive engagement was important, but not the be-all and end-all. And it was really more grassroots engagement and understanding what was going on. And I found that the more that we got nursing leaders, nursing directors, clinicians, section chiefs involved in decision-making, the more valuable it was than simply dictating from on high what the training was going to be or what the rollout schedule was going to be. So I think it really is important to get buy-in at all levels, but significantly at the mid-clinical range when everybody understands what's going on and is bought in together, it's very important.
A lot of what CIOs do is implementing software, and a lot of the vendors have methodologies, best practices for doing so. Some are known for having very good methodologies, and a lot of people like that, very strict methodologies. What are your thoughts around that kind of thing? Do you want a vendor who tells you exactly how to do it, or do you want to have a little more control and say, well, okay, but here's also what I think? What are your thoughts around that?
So some of this is shaded by my background. So I've always come from institutions that have standardized tools and implement them in a very direct fashion. I've not come from development shops. I think if I'd spent more time, especially earlier in my career, in development shop making great tools, I would have more of an affinity for it and think when faced with a decision, gosh, how do we build this for ourselves? Because I came into healthcare IT late and only by happenstance when I was thrown into a CIO role because of a need in an open position, I just found myself implementing tools that were in front of us. And I found that just simply following the plan that the vendor puts together, it's not always the best, but it's, I believe, better than thinking that we know better than the vendor does. And one of the things that I found is, like I said early on, it's mostly about people and processes, not about the technology itself. So I think even a mediocre tool, when implemented and rolled out well, can be great. A great tool, when not done so well, can really hamper operations. So it's less about tweaking the tool than it is about making sure that everybody understands how to use it. And if the vendor has a methodology for doing it and you can standardize on it, I think that's important. I've been in a couple of health systems that had many different hospitals, and I saw IT organizations that were overwhelmed by years of trying to customize to meet the needs of hospital C and D and F at the expense of the other ones. And so I've been a strong proponent of standardization. And when it comes to rolling out tools and EMRs, standardization generally means taking a tool pretty much out of the box, making some modifications to meet the local needs in a standardized well, so it's the same thing across all of the hospitals and health system. Implement it just about as well as you can, and then make the changes that are necessary that you discover afterwards instead of trying to think you can pre-think all of them.
Very good. Let's talk a little bit about the military. Big part of your background, also Darren's background. Tell me maybe one of the greatest tools that the military gave you, or approaches or way of thinking that helped you in your career. And if you can think of something, is there anything about your military training that you had to undo or that was suboptimal for leadership in the different careers you've had post-military?
Good questions. I'll start with the greatest leadership lesson, and that's humility. Any person who comes out in a leadership role as a military officer, be it the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, or the Marines, you show up as a 22 or 23-year-old ensign or second lieutenant responsible for 20 or 30 sailors or soldiers, and the people reporting to you are generally older than you. In fact, the person directly reporting to you, a very senior chief petty officer or senior master sergeant, might have 15, 20, 25 years experience, and they work for you. You're their boss, and you're 23 and you have all of several weeks of experience. And knowing, gosh, I'm the boss, but this person knows far more than I do right now and probably will ever do, is a really both humbling position, and it also teaches you what's important. And because I was thrust into that position, I showed up on my first ship. I was 22 years old. I had about 40 people who were in the communications center reporting to me, and I had a chief petty officer radioman who was about 50 years old reporting to me. I realized my role is not to tell them what to do. It's to make sure that they've got the resources necessary to do their job. So it became less about, hey, Chief, this is what you need to do today, and it was more, Chief, I'm your boss, but really what do I need to do to make sure that you've got the tools, you've got the air cover you need to get your job done. And I learned that lesson early on, and it served me really well. In terms of undoing, there's a stereotype that military people are hard-headed and only go about things in one way. What I found impressive is some of the military leaders who work their way into politics or in senior roles generally tend to be really sharp people who know politics as much as they do the military. And I found myself, when I was in civilian roles after the military, being one of the people who was observing everybody else in the organization, and I think it made me a better manager. I don't think there was anything specific that I needed to undo as much as convince people that the skills I were using were not about a certain military mindset and more about how do we work together to get things done.
Yeah, it's very interesting. People, you might think that people who've been in the military were used to relying on rank, and that could be a problem, but it's exactly the opposite. I've heard, what you said, I've heard from other folks in the military who I've talked to, just from my own curiosity, and who were in that exact position you were in, and who say, if you think you're going to come in there and use your rank to tell these guys, not senior in rank, but senior in experience, what to do, you're going to fail. They'll just make sure you fail. So I thought that was very interesting.
You're right. I'm sure Darren felt the same thing when he was in the Air Force. It really is about influential leadership. It's not about institutionalized leadership.
Make sense, Darren?
It absolutely does. I just go back to a quote, never tell people how to do things, tell them what to do, and they will surprise you with their ingenuity.
Very good, gentlemen. Well, I tell you, that was a real pure pleasure, and I hope all our attendees feel the same way. I want to thank everyone, Daniel and Darren and Perceptive Software for sponsoring. Like I mentioned, we'll have an archive and you'll receive an email when it's ready. Any folks who have the CHCIO certification who have attended can claim 1 credit. If you've asked us to handle that for you, we will. If you haven't, don't forget to contact Chime. Questions, comments, suggestions for improvements, please email me as always. We're always looking to make this the best webinar program in the business. And go to our site to see our robust upcoming schedule in the last 12 months of archived events. Well, with that, I want to again thank everyone for attending, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.